here today with Henry King. He and his co-author Vala Afshar are award-winning executives and technology practitioners specializing in business strategy, digital transformation, and AI technologies. And together they have written Autonomous: Why the Fittest Businesses Embrace AI-First Strategies in Digital Labor, and Boundless: A New Mindset for Unlimited Business Success. So first of all, welcome, Henry. It's very good to have you here.
Lovely. Thanks, Alison. It's a really pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I'm so fascinated to dive into all of this. So let's talk about that, the title and the subtitle also of Autonomous. There's so much there, isn't it? AI first strategies, digital labor. What is, I mean, digital labor, I think was the bit that really caught my eye, and I suspect has been the big sort of search term. What is the promise of AI for businesses when it comes to digital labor?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and yes, apologies for the long title.
It's a long old subtitle, that.
It is quite long, and someone did say to us previously, so none of my listeners will actually understand a word of that. So we were quite proud of
Well,
the
we're a very
subtitle.
intelligent bunch. All of my listeners will be all over it like a rash. It'll be absolutely fine. But it's interesting, actually. A side note: we are writing subtitles as much for the machine as the human these days, aren't
That
we?
is correct. Yes, that's exactly right. So to answer your question, of course, um, a lot of the energy, a lot of the writing, a lot of the talking, a lot of the debate about AI at the moment is really about generative AI.
Yeah.
And that, of course, has been super interesting. And, ever since ChatGPT launched publicly in November 22. But what we're really looking at, much more than generative AI, is agentic AI,
Yes.
where agentic AI or AI as an agent is actually able to perform tasks on its own without human supervision, although potentially, of course, with human governance and human oversight, but nevertheless without direct supervision. And we think that that's really an important distinction that not a lot of people are drawing. A lot of people are still talking about
Mm.
generative AI and whether it's really intelligent. Is it really making sense of the world, or is it simply like figuring out the next logical word? Can it really help you think? All of these kinds of questions. And I think those are interesting questions, but not really that relevant to business, because I think where all of the business impact is going to be is in agents, not just individual agents, but agents working together and agents working with humans, and what that really means for the design of businesses. Because I think it's it is obvious, but it's not something that anyone would have had to think about even 5 or 10 years ago. But all of our businesses are and have always been designed by humans for humans.
Mm.
Right? We are. I mean, I don't know whether you remember the FUBU, the apparel. It was called For Us by Us. It
Okay.
was founded by Damon John, and it was really apparel for the hip hop community. And in that same sense, all of our businesses have been designed for us by us, for humans by humans. And that's what the big change is now. So we
Yeah.
just assumed businesses are humans. And now we're going to have this new species, if you want to call it that, or at least new member of the workforce. And I think that will force us to question what is good about being human. What are things that we used to think that were important that actually aren't important anymore or may not be important? And what are the things that maybe we've taken for granted that actually we need to think much more about and take much more seriously as being humans? So that's really what the digital workforce component of the subtitle is, and what we talk about in the book quite a lot.
And there's something really positive in that as well. You talk a lot about that sort of the cognitive transfer and what that
Yes.
makes possible for humans. So this isn't, I mean, I don't want to sort of dive down the old tropes, but it isn't about sort of replacing people. This is about augmenting people and taking out some of the blockers from business. But just maybe you could give us some examples. What does that look like when you have that cognitive transfer, when you can get agentic AI to take over some of the stuff that actually humans don't do all that well, actually, and you free humans up to do different things?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think using one of the models that we use a lot in the book of the autonomous car, because that's just something that's like in our faces every day now. We
Mm.
probably all have, if we have a car, we probably have some level of autonomy or at least some level of assist, whether that is lane assist or whether it's cruise control or whether it's parking assist or a combination of all those things. So we're used to having this technology in our everyday world that is helpful, that is assistive, that makes driving easier. But as you rightly say, we're still responsible for a lot of the tasks that actually we're not that great at. So paying attention, um, you know, there are so many accidents that are caused because we are tired, or because we're grumpy, or because we're texting, or because we're incapacitated in some other way. We're texting or we're speaking to our passengers, or whatever it happens to be. There are all sorts of ways in which we get distracted, and that has a very, very significant impact on safety. And what the technology at that level is going to enable us to do is to be a lot safer. And so that's at a very, if you like, that's a very linear, maybe almost sort of incremental level of improvements and benefits that we're going to get from AI in our car. But then there's a very non-linear set of improvements, which is going to be, as you say, the kind of the transfer of responsibility from the human to the AI that then frees up the human to do things that are more creative. So we're no longer going to be drivers of our cars. We will be passengers, and yet we're always going to be responsible for setting the direction. We're going to
Yeah.
tell the car where we want it to go. And if we care, we can tell it the direction or the route, excuse me, that we want it to take. But freeing up the human from actually being a machine operator to being just, if you like, the setter of the mission and the setter of the direction, actually has a very, very profound impact, not only on that individual human and that individual car, but on a much wider impact on society as a whole, and the design of our towns, the design of our villages, and the design of everyday life. Um, Down in southern Arizona, this is typically a kind of a senior community. And so there are a lot of people in their 70s and their 80s, and they are beginning to go through that process of thinking, should I still be driving?
Mm.
And a lot of the times, their children, the sandwich generation, of which I think probably we're a part, we sometimes are responsible for having those conversations with our parents and their friends. In 5 years' time, I don't think that we're going to have those conversations
Mm.
anymore, because the autonomous car is going to enable them to maintain their mobility. They're not going to be isolated as perhaps they now are if they're no longer able to drive. There are other members of society. So my nephew has occasional seizures.
Mm.
So he's not able to drive. And he's a young man, he's 25. And kind of imagine being a youngster nowadays and not having the freedom of mobility.
Mm.
And you see all of your friends having that freedom. In 5 years' time, he'll have that same mobility. So autonomy for the car gives us autonomy as humans, much greater autonomy. It democratizes and frees us up to do other things that are kind of more meaningful to us. So I think that that's the overall
That's a great
model. And
example.
it's not just
Mm.
an analogy, it's a real model. I mean, we think the autonomous car is really the first autonomous system, if you will,
Mm.
that's
It
in
doesn't feel
our
that far away
everyday
at all,
life.
does it? Yeah.
And we
It's
think that our companies are going to become autonomous systems in the same way, and will start to open up all of those new capabilities to humans to be freer, still to set the mission,
yeah.
still to be responsible for the purpose and all of those things of their organizations, but nevertheless to be free to do more valuable, more human, more creative things.
And what's interesting, of course, about an organisation is it doesn't have the whole infrastructure and sort of public policy issues that come along with a whole societal application like driverless cars. So within an organization, and you talk about the sort of the future fit, the ones that are sort of fittest for the future, really adopting this sort of technology. What are you still seeing as the blockers to that? Are they systemic? Are they ideological? Are they simply lack of sort of technical understanding? What's going on there?
I think all of the above. Um, I think systemically, our businesses are set up for ease of management largely, even though
Mm.
if I say it's easy to manage, no one in a large organization is going to agree with me. They're going to say
Doesn't
like,
feel easy to manage.
yeah, it's really, really tough. And I get it. And I don't disagree with that. But if you look at the way that we organize departments, for instance, marketing department and the IT department and the HR department and finance and so on and so forth, those are all set up to be able to manage the resources within those
Mm,
departments as most cost effectively as possible, as easily as possible. It's got nothing to do with the customer experience, right? We're
mm,
not organizing our businesses in order to give our customers the best possible experiences. We're organizing them to make it as easy to manage as possible. But within that ease of management comes all kinds of things that just slow our businesses down.
mm.
So decision
Blockers.
making across those departments, what we call silos, right?
Mm,
And this is what Boundless was really about. Decision making across silos really slows businesses down. Anytime that you want to get a resource that you're not that you don't have direct control over, and you have to kind of negotiate with other leaders in order to get access to those resources. That slows down decision making. That slows action taking down. Um, every time people go on holiday, but they haven't, and this sounds trivial, right? But it happens all the time. I mean, everyone takes vacation, and every time people do that, but they don't have true levels of delegation down and subordinated decision making and so on and so forth. That just stops
oh
projects
yeah,
and initiatives and processes in their tracks.
yeah,
And there
100%.
are so many ways in which these everyday blockages just slow down companies.
Mm,
And everyone thinks that they're moving very fast. And I get it because everyone is working really, really hard. And individually and as teams, people are making superhuman efforts. But nearly all of those superhuman efforts just get slowed down by the larger context of the structure within which we work and the bureaucracies within we work and the management structures within which we work and some of the systems themselves within which we work. So trying to go fast is it takes superhuman effort. And what we really need in the AI world is we need to be able to move fast routinely.
mm,
And that means being able to take out all of those blockages that we talk about in the book. And maybe we over discuss it a little bit, but because I think we've got like 5 pages of just bullet points of, we've got something like 18 different types of management blockage and lots of other things. So maybe we overdo it a bit, but we think it's important because most people are just not aware that that's happening.
mm.
Most people think we're working really, really fast and really, really hard. And most people are, but those are not having a larger impact. It's not causing the organization as a whole to be fast.
And yet that's the way we've always done it, and people don't like change. I mean, it comes down to the soft stuff, doesn't it?
It
Change
does.
is really hard, and change
It
is
does.
threatening, and yeah,
And
and it's
that's
all about.
part of the philosophical piece that you're talking about.
Mm,
Well, it's not just philosophical, it's mindset,
yeah,
right? Which is we all think that change is external. And so
it's
we
being done to
organize,
us.
we build our businesses to be resilient. And I
Mm,
understand that word, but too often what resilient really means is it's an organization that can withstand change. It can
mm,
withstand turbulence. It can withstand uncertainty and ambiguity. And I get why we use that model. We've always used the idea of kind of structural stability, but I don't think we can use it anymore. I think that's outdated. I think that we need to start using new ideas and we need to start becoming familiar with the idea that the dust is just never going to settle. There's no point in waiting for it to settle because it's not going to. So everything is going to be turbulent, everything is going to be uncertain, everything is going to be ambiguous. And the best way to deal with that is not to try and resist it any longer, but it's actually to try to develop your own organization to be change native, internally, such that then change becomes the norm and stasis becomes the abnormality.
It's funny how language and metaphor govern how we think about things, isn't it? And that's one of
I
the
think it's really,
obligations of the business book writer, I think, isn't it? Is to offer people new
yes,
ways of looking at an organization.
exactly.
When you're writing about AI, one of the big challenges is that you're writing a book, which is a very old tech piece of technology. It takes a long time to get a book out. It takes a long time to get it written, and then it takes ridiculous long time to get it published, and then it has quite a long shelf life. Talk me through how you approach writing about such a fast-moving topic with such a slow-moving format.
It's a really good question, and yeah, I think it's fascinating. So, a little bit of background, because I think it will help. But a long, long time ago, and I mean, in the mid to late 90s, um, I read a book. It was called Out of Control by Kevin Kelly, who was executive editor of Wired magazine, and he was writing basically, it was sort of a survey of everything that was cool at the time. And the subtitle was like The Marriage of the Born and the Made. So it was really about human systems and AI systems and technology systems, and roboticism and all these kind of things were beginning to merge into these really interesting new systems that were no longer completely human, but they were not one just machinic, if you like. They were not just technological. And his book fascinated me, and it was just a compendium of lots and lots of really cool ideas, some of which I knew about, but a lot of others that I didn't. And that set me off on a kind of a voyage of exploration. And I really wanted to know what the next book was that he was writing. And finally, he announced that he was writing a new book. And the question that he was asking himself was, what does technology want? And I thought that is so fascinating. That's such a courageous question to be asking. Not asking, is technology capable of wanting anything, but what does it want? And I thought that's fantastic. So I have to give myself a go at answering that question for myself. Not that I'll answer it, as well as him. But then that set me off on a whole train of discovery and an exploration. And that started to get me very, very interested in the idea of silos and siloed organization and storage, and the accumulation of knowledge and the accumulation of other kinds of resources, things of value, whether that's grain or ideas or expertise or oil or water or whatever it happens to be. And that was really the germ that led slowly but surely to the book Boundless. So, and then the book Boundless really provided for Vala and me a context and a frame that allow us to explore lots of different ideas. And so, autonomous has really been a beneficiary of the fact of that long history and of that long run up, such that by the time it came to writing autonomous, we already kind of knew what we wanted to write about. We understood how to write it. We understood how to work together. And so it was much, much faster. So it took us. So, so in terms of process, we meet twice a week, every week. So we meet for an hour on Tuesday and an hour on Friday every week. And we do that through the entire year, whether we've got anything to say to each other or not. Before we start writing the book, of course, most of those conversations are about ideas. And we are writing articles and we're testing ideas out on each other. A lot of the ideas that I come up with, Valerie says, Linda, that's ridiculous. That'll never work. And so I go back to the drawing board. A lot of what you talk about in exploratory writing, it's that kind of phase, right? It's like, so I read the book Skunk Works
Hmm.
about Lockheed Martin and their extremely innovative a practice of of creating very, very highly advanced aeroplanes. And one of the planes that they designed was called the F-117, which is the Nighthawk, which was the world's first stealth bomber. And it was described in the book as being inherently unstable.
Hmm.
And I was like, inherently unstable as an aircraft? I don't even understand that idea. And so I started thinking about what it means to be inherently unstable. And after years and doing some exploratory writing, I felt bold enough to be able to tell Vala that I thought that organizations needed to start to become inherently unstable. And he was like, that's craziness. We're not going to tell business people that they need to actually embrace instability. We can't do that. So we went back and forth again for another couple of years until the whole idea started to emerge. And it really did kind of emerge over that period of talking more about the difference between businesses and systems in general and tools and equipment that are easy to manage versus those tools and equipment and systems that are high performance. And so so that's the process, right? Which is, it's not always fast. And it's very two-way and it's very exploratory, and we build on ideas and we discard plenty. But then we've got to a point where we probably then have between 5 and 10 articles we've actually written about those ideas, and those then become the main ideas that go into the book.
It's gonna, but that's so, because what you're describing really is an ecosystem, or it's like a life cycle of idea creation and workshopping and
It
full
is.
expression in the book. I love that. It doesn't quite answer the question about the writing about a very fast moving topic in a in an old tech sort of book. So how do you, what design decisions do you take to allow you to write about a topic that's moving very fast and ensure that the book will still be valuable in a year from now, 2 years from now?
It's a really good question. And I mean, the honest answer to the last part of your question is we can't be sure.
Mm,
So what we do is, so in terms of the design decisions that we make, the first design decision is that the ideas have to be ours, and we have to be confident about those. Between the two of us, we can come and go, and we can pull and tug and question each other and all that kind of stuff. But we're not really interested as authors in just recirculating other ideas that are already commonplace. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do, because in fact, most books take ideas that are already quite, they're quite well known, and they
mm.
add a
They
new
build on
flavor to
what's,
them. They
yes,
add a new
exactly.
perspective, or whatever happens, or new stories about them, or
Mm,
whatever it happens to be. And that we're not we're not saying that's a bad idea. We just believe that we need to put our own ideas forwards. And that's the way that we can kind of generate most value. So, ideas are the things that take the most time for us. And then we think about kind of content and voice. And with the content, some content, we know we have to write ourselves. So AI is not very good at writing stories. It doesn't tell stories very well at all. So when we're telling stories, and we're telling stories that illuminate most of the most important ideas, we write all of that. But then there's other content which is more a matter of extending some of the key ideas and just adding kind of meat to the bones, if you will. So we have two frameworks in the book, one of which is called the 7 levels of autonomous work, and one of which is the pseudo model, the M pseudo model, which is the machine scale, sense, understand, decide, and act. And we used AI to help us just put the meat on those particular bones. And in those parts of the book, we make it clear, we say, what comes next is detail. And if you don't need the detail of these ideas, if you don't need to go through 5,000 words to understand the 7 levels of autonomous work at that level of detail, they can just skip it. But it's here because some people will value understanding these concepts at that level. And so we will use AI to help us with some of that work. And then aligned with that is the whole idea of voice. And again, sometimes it's really important that the voice is clearly ours. And in some other places, especially in the bits that I just kind of mentioned, it's not so important that it's ours. So we make very intentional design decisions about ideas, about content, about voice, and also about flow, right? So
Mm.
flow, I can't really write a book until I understand the overall argument flow. So we spend quite a lot of time before we start writing the book, making sure that we understand the full flow of the argument and all of the major ideas that are in that argument as a logical um, as a logical flow. That then turns into a table of contents, and then spend a lot of time, especially on chapters 1 and 2. Um, and so flow is important in that sense. But again, using AI, sometimes you really get the sense that it's just generating the next logical word. And you start to get to a point where it just becomes boring and generic. And so we really then need to step in as well and make sure actually that it's got the voice of the human. Um, and so that's kind of our process.
And
It's
it doesn't surprise me at all. It shouldn't surprise anybody, I suppose, that what you're modelling is sort of what you're talking about in the book, isn't it? It's
yes,
that
exactly.
collaboration. It's deciding what is best done by AI,
Yes.
providing the governance, monitoring, pulling back. It's really interesting because you said earlier something about freeing people up to do the more interesting stuff, and I think that's been one of the frustrations, particularly for publishers, is that a lot of people have looked at AI and go, "Oh, brilliant, we can use this to write." And we're like, "No, no, no, use
No,
the
no.
AI to do something else so that you have time to write." You
Yes.
know? So yeah, really interesting to see that modelled. I love that. I'm going to ask you, Henry, for your best tip. So if somebody is listening today, perhaps they are writing a business book, could be on any topic, but I think I'm particularly interested if they are writing about AI or technology in some way. What would you say to them?
I think first of all, like, continue to go for it, because well, we both are, clearly believers in the value of ideas and the value of creativity. So anyone else who wants to participate should feel welcome and encouraged and motivated to participate. But I think the main bit of advice, which goes back to something that we just talked about earlier, which is, be proud of your idea. Um, Generate your idea, think deeply about your idea, extend your idea, but also be aware that there are very, very few things that are really new under the sun. And so be aware of that and look outside to see what's already been written in the concept that you're already interested in, and pay respect to that
Yeah.
tradition that already exists. I spent a lot of my career, at least 3/4 of it, in consulting. And consultants are very, very smart people, but they tend to think that when they come up with an idea, it's their idea. And and I'm not going to name any names, but there was a team that wrote a book about an important topic, and they wrote it as if they had come up with the
Mm.
framework themselves, and it was actually a framework that had been developed by someone else at least 5 years previously, and I felt really bad for like everyone involved, because they didn't intentionally repeat the framework, uh, but they did actually repeat it.
It's
And they
actually, I'm just going to
didn't.
step in there as well, because it's one of the risks of using AI, isn't it? Is that it doesn't name its sources. It pulls ideas in, and you can find yourself inadvertently plagiarizing people or not giving the hat tip where it's due.
Oh, and these were people who were writing a book without AI.
No, no, I
So
get that, but
this was
it's
about
I think it's
5 years ago. But you're
exacerbated if you're using
exactly
AI.
right. Yes. So it's a question of be proud of your idea, develop your idea, but be aware of the history that probably already surrounds that
Yeah.
idea.
And that's
Um,
okay, right? This is a conversation. You are adding your voice to an ongoing conversation. You don't have to have the last word on your topic. You won't.
Yeah, and
I
you
think
won't
it's
have the
important
first
to.
word either. But
Exactly.
what I've also found is that when you then kind of pay tribute to the history of it, you start learning a lot more about your own
Right.
idea, and it starts to become even more interesting, not less
Yeah.
interesting,
Yeah. And
because
it's a
other
good service
people
to
have
the
been
reader, isn't
engaged
it?
in it. It's
Yeah.
so that's I think the one
That's a
tip that I would
great tip. Yeah, terrific. Thank you. Very well articulated as well. Now, I always ask my guests for a book recommendation as well. You're not allowed to recommend your own, sorry. But the Wired one was a good one. But what book would you recommend that we read if we haven't already?
um, well, I think it's probably clear in this conversation again that we both kind of love innovation and creativity, and I was very fortunate to work with a company called the Doblin Group, Doblin, for a number of years, and they are one of the preeminent design thinking and innovation agencies in the US. They're now part of Deloitte Consulting. But they wrote a book. Their leader, Larry Keeley, and other colleagues, Helen Walters and others, wrote a book called The 10 Types of Innovation. And they were, and still are, fantastic company, really, really smart people, full of designers. So very kind of designer thinking rather than kind of business strategy thinking. A lot of really kind of wonderful frameworks and a wonderful way of thinking about innovation. So I would really kind of strongly recommend that. It's very much pre-AI. It's very kind of pure around human-centered and design thinking and jobs to be done, and a lot of those kind of ideas around design thinking and those related concepts. Very, very strong. We now need to kind of read it and practice it and use all of those principles with the AI aspect very
Yeah.
much in mind that we didn't previously. But I would
Time for a second
strongly
edition.
recommend that book as a provocative and very useful book for business people.
Great. Thank you. I wasn't aware of it. So I love it. Love getting a new recommendation. And then if people want to find out more about the work that you and Vala do, the books you've written, where should they go?
Well, thank you for that. We're both easily found on LinkedIn. He's, Vala Afshar, all one word. I'm Henry King, all one word. We write a lot on ZDNet. We've got an article coming out in Forbes next week, I think, on the 18th.
We're
And
speaking in
I've got
November.
a
That's the
I've
18th of
got a
November.
website which is henryking.com. I haven't updated that for quite a while, so some of the ideas are rather old, but LinkedIn, if you want to connect with us, then that's probably the easiest way to do it, and we'd love to hear from anyone.
Well, I'll put those links up on the show notes at extraordinarybusinessbooks.com. And thank you so much for your time today. It's been a really fascinating conversation. And I take great heart from the fact that somebody who's right at the sort of bleeding edge of AI implementation is also using exploratory writing. And
Oh,
that
yes.
whole kind of idea ecosystem, I think that's wonderful. That's the true marriage, isn't it, of
Yeah.
the human creativity and the AI execution. I love it. Thanks, Henry, for your time
Great.
today.
Thank you very much, Alison. It's been a pleasure.